So when people are buying video games without any merit or nostalgic roots, they're simply buying into lost fragments throughout time, sort of like embarking on a lost odyssey. I wonder if people actually invest in video games. Oh, didn't see you there. Welcome back to Jaymorz Collectibles. Today in this video we'll be talking about the hottest fad that no one is talking about. The vintage video game market and why there's a lot of buzz around that market segment in the world of collectibles. So when it comes to the world of video game collectibles, each person must first identify their position in the market. They're either a collector or an investor. They're almost contradictory in a sense, so you can't be both entities at the same time. Now the difference between an investor and a collector is that an investor will always go for what the market is after, whereas the collector will go through the creme de la creme at the bottom of the bulk bin just to get something that triggers an emotional response. So within these separate categories, price is determined using different factors. Take games that are geared towards investors, where condition is king and monumental towards the price of the item. Whereas for a collector, it's actually just what people would want to pay to relive that experience. And as of filming of this video, prices in each category are slowly ticking up. So what does this mean? Well, quite simply, people are parking money towards the gaming hobby and spilling over from other spaces, i.e. Pokemon, simply due to laws of supply and demand. There are no other external factors that would make an investor or a collector keen on one particular game. And because there's so much money sloshing around the collectibles market, it's inevitable for those wallets to find the video game segment. So with the secondary market of video games seeing record-setting volumes of completed transactions, we're also seeing a proportional demand when it comes to grading these video games, i.e. from both VGA and WATA companies. However, not nearly as many entries as the competitive TCG space, simply because of the logistics, size, and overall cost to grade these items. So that was my 30-second preface in video games and the current market as of the filming of this video. So for all my collectors out there, collect till your heart's content. Now let's gear towards the investor side of the video. Alright, so you made it through the beginning of the video and you said to yourself, I am an investor. Joey, I am in the video game market to make money, not to go and become a Timmy and hoard a bunch of video games. Well, that's great and all, but you should know, my 2 cents for the matter, video games are what I like to call a C-tier market. It's high risk, high reward.
It's too risky.
Except the reward isn't as great as some other high risk opportunities out there. So that's my 2 cents when it comes to video games. But as every prudent investor out there, diversify so that when one market goes down, the other can help stabilize it. This might be the golden egg when it comes to collectibles investing one day. So here I am to tell you how to begin. So first and foremost, I've established 4 different categories to compartmentalize each of the video games as an asset. You have your cult classics, you have your Japanese horror video games, you have your JRPGs, and then you have obscure titles. Now the first one goes without mention. Cult classics are the ones you see when you rented video games simply by walking into Blockbuster and seeing the latest and greatest on full display.
Now Blockbuster Video has all your favorites for the holidays, like Sonic and Knuckles from Sega.
Now the obscure titles are the ones that you never heard about, never even saw on any of the magazines, yet they still exist and there's still some hype around them. Japanese horror games are what I like to call a diamond in the rough, because again, just like obscure titles, you've never heard about them, yet they have a huge following when it comes to this genre of video games. And then the last market segment that I love personally, JRPGs.
Aren't they just the coolest? Just everything about them.
Simply because I grew up playing with them, and they just pulled on those nostalgic roots and have so much merit that there's a huge following that surpasses even the biggest cult classics. So now that we've identified the 4 different types of, market sectors within the investable side of video games, which would be the best to invest in? Well, just like with all things investable, you kind of want to diversify even within this market category of investable video games. So what I'd like to do is actually have a percentage split between each of the categories, never overextend on each one. However, that's based off the pure dollar value that each video game title sort of commands. Now, dissecting it a little further, you have different consoles within each subcategory. So this makes it a little bit more difficult to sort of pinpoint one particular asset to park your money in. However, with that being said, there are select consoles that are the golden staple of video game investing. Hence the price disparity between select video games. So let's look at some examples found in the first category, cult classics. This would be your Mario, your Pokemon, your Grand Theft Auto, Halo, Metal Gear behind me, and so forth and so on. Now, games found in these categories are quite nice to invest in because they're easier to liquidate if you need the capital, because there's a larger following surrounding these titles. Now, the unfortunate truth of video games found within this particular market segment is that they've already been discovered, have been acknowledged as investment grade opportunities, and have already priced themselves within today's market. So there's no hidden item that you can potentially find great opportunity investing towards. So you're paying the premium that's already been priced in for hopes of higher returns. So pretty much, if it's not trading within the market at high enough prices, it's not an investment grade cult classic opportunity. Just remember, games found within this category have been printed in upwards of tens of millions of copies. That is why they're very, very condition sensitive when it comes to their target price. A lot of these copies have been opened to play with, and none have been really kept sealed. So, when investing in this category, it's particularly important to invest in sealed copies to have a position with artificial scarcity, which in turn makes it easier to liquidate and also appreciate. Now, if you want my opinion of what to buy in this category, I would go with either the Pokemon Blue or Red, or any of the Marios that are found in the N64 console, because I think those are undervalued for the amount of nostalgic value or merit that it has with the widespread population. Now let's go on to the next category, which would be one of my personal favorites, JRPGs. This would be your Final Fantasies, your Chrono Triggers, your Earthbounds, etc. Basically any game that originated from Japan that had RPG elements in its gameplay. Whereas the cult classics have already been priced within the current market, these games are lagging behind and therefore greater opportunity should that time come. It's always a matter of when, not if, when it comes to investment grade items. These games are arguably more sentimental than the games found within the category of cult classics. Case in point with me, because nostalgia was garnered by spending countless hours playing these titles and getting lost in the story arc. Now, most of the games found within this category were not mass produced. Of course, you have a few exceptions, like with the Final Fantasy series, but a majority of the games were not mass produced. Let's take a look at one of the premier examples within this subcategory. My personal favorite, Valkyrie Profile. Now, this game sold over 600,000 in Japan copies. Just for argument's sake, Mario, the first one, Mario Bros. For the NES, sold nearly over 20 million copies. Look at the volume difference between both items. Now, not only that, this is an English copy. Only 73,000 copies were sold in the US, let alone the game scratches easily. And this is sealed. So you have that going for it. So again, hidden gem within this subcategory, especially when you get the particulars right. That's how you get an investment grade product with a large opportunity. And if you go to the eBay sold listings for this one particular game, they're selling every day for increasing pricing because there's increasing demand. So this is what I call a lights out type of product. I don't even think about it. I buy whenever I find a low enough cost basis to add to my position. You can never have enough of that one particular product. Same thing with Mercadian Masks when it comes to Magic the Gathering, at least in my opinion. And if you haven't noticed already, the JRPGs that you see right behind me were made primarily for the PlayStation console. And of course, you do have some unique outlying games such as Earthbound and Chrono Trigger for the SNES. Now, the packaging for PlayStation games isn't very condition friendly. A lot of the jeweled cases do eventually crack because of how they're stored, handled, or just put away. And because of which, finding one that does not have any cracks is very difficult to come across in this particular jeweled case design. The PlayStation 2 games are a lot friendlier when it comes to storing and handling, and the same can be said about the paper cartons when it comes to Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. The no seal and rather large size packaging for, let's say, Earthbound is rather difficult to keep intact as well. Now, while we're on this category, I might as well mention that some of the games do have the green label, which is your greatest hits, versus the black label, which is, I guess, your first edition printing of that one particular game. So with JRPGs being my favorite category, what is Jaymorz Collectibles adding to his position? Well, you start with Valkyrie Profile because, again, I still believe due to only 73,000 copies in the US, and the game gets scratched very easily. I would say maybe 60% of the copies are actually in working condition. Now, with that being said, maybe only 10% of that are actually sealed, and most of which are probably overseas. I would also argue Wild Arms, which I have right in front of me, because it is the first game of its IP, and there wasn't a great following at that time of release. And therefore, you have scarcity, natural scarcity, and attrition in the market. So finding this sealed is actually a diamond in the rough. So with that being said, you want to go towards games with low volume production because it has natural scarcity and therefore drives up the price over time. Not to mention, both Lunar 1 and 2 have been seeing tremendous price increases because it's very difficult to find a sealed copy that is in near mint condition. And last point to make, I doubt I'll move the market, but Alundra is rare as heck, especially complete in box with the map and a mint condition jewel case. Now, I mean, look at the attention of detail. Just look at the holographic casing, and then look at the gold embossed text right in the back. I mean, the love for JRPGs is like none other back in the day. Love this category, but let's move on to the next. Now, the next category to discuss is one that came out of the woodwork and actually adopted quite an interesting following, and that would be your Japanese survivor horror games. So I do have Haunting Ground in the background, that being one of them. You have Rule of Rose. There's not much to say about this one particular category. Of course, Resident Evil Director Cut being the creme de la creme because it was the first to inspire this genre moving forward. Not to mention one of my favorite games within that category also. Now, these games are stemming from a rather niche franchise and therefore did not have the publicity or the exposure to actually warrant demand upon its inception. And therefore, you have scarcity. So, supply and demand is huge when it comes to games within this category, and not to mention conditions of those games. What would I buy? Any PS1 Resident Evils, your Parasite Eve, and also Haunting Ground and Clock Tower, as well as Rule of Rose. So, you have a widespread market share within that particular niche genre, therefore you really can't go wrong. Of course, do your research, know what you're buying into, and your cost basis, again, is most prudent when you're an investor, so buy carefully and cautiously. Last category on the list would be your obscure titles. This would be your Mike Tyson Punch-Out, produced for the NES, Poop Slinger, which was a limited edition Kickstarter campaign run that people thought was an April Fool's joke, and so forth and so on. So any of the games that you never heard of, that no one would imagine playing at that time. Again, as much as I grade video games as a whole when it comes to investment and your investment portfolios as a C tier product, when it comes to games within this particular subcategory, they are a niche game that is very illiquid. There is no person that will go online, research the game to know its existence, and then determine if it's worth your capital for investing. So therefore, it's very hard to move this particular product. So there we go. We have an overview on video game investing as a whole. Again, I ranked these in 4 particular categories, each with their own merits and pros and cons. Of course, as of the filming of this video, I am only adding into my position JRPGs and Japanese survivor horror games as that particular category I feel is underappreciated. Of course, the cult classics, you can't go wrong with that. It's easier to liquidate as well. But again, cost basis is everything. And as of this time, there are better ways to park my money for better opportunity. As of right now, I think the market is also having a hard time figuring out what the prices should be on these particular items across all 4 categories. However, if you can find something comparatively that is at a lower price, then it's fair game. Of course, you have some tools to help you out with that, such as pricecharting.com and eBay sold listings. Those 2 would be the most premier types of instruments to use when determining cost association and market value. One last thing, and I get this asked all the time, are strategy guides from Brady Games and Prima Games an investable item? Yes and no. They are investable because they were once collectible and utilized in supplementing the game experience. However, the demand for these strategy guides pales in comparison to the demand of the actual game. And therefore, video game investing already being in my books a C tier type of investment, the guides, I would call them a D tier. Of course, it's great to have a one of in your collection because you never know, and I'm surprised no one has attempted grading the strategy guides because I think that would actually spark demand for certain copies. All in all, video games are still an investable asset within anyone's portfolio should they choose to go within that market segment, and the market cap within this segment is rather large for some opportunity. And just remember, whether you're a collector who bared the grunt and watched throughout the entire video, or an investor looking to enter the space, you never want to be in a position where you're just embarking in a lost odyssey. So, take these tips wisely. Make sure you do your due diligence before investing or parking any money in any of these games. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you like this video if you found it informative or helpful in any way. Comment down below if you're a video game investor or a collector. Tick that bell and subscribe so I can catch you in the next Jaymorz Collectibles.